How's it going, everyone? Welcome to my talk. Today we're going to be talking about doing corporate reconnaissance using open source intelligence. My name is Cody Bernardi, and we'll get into the intro in a bit. Now, before I get started with this talk, I just want to give a shout out to everyone that has helped me kind of learn what I know. I'm definitely standing on the shoulders of a few giants. Here's a few folks right here that have a lot more knowledge than I do, and I've learned from these individuals, and there's more people I just couldn't fit on here. So definitely check out all of these people I have listed right here. These are their Twitter handles, so definitely check out what they have to offer, because I just have a tiny bit of what everyone has to offer here. So who am I? I didn't put that on there because that was kind of generic, and I thought UNAME would be a little more interesting, even though it's not somewhat correct. Like I said, my name is Cody Bernardi. My hacker handle is Arco0x4RK0. Don't ask how I got it. It's a long story. I specialize in OSINT and vulnerability management, and I can kind of combine those two skills together, and you could kind of call it cyber threat intelligence. I was at Amazon for 4.5 years, mainly doing vulnerability management. I was also in the fulfillment centers doing IT stuff and data center stuff. I was in the Army for 6 years doing cyber operations. I put an extra C in there. It's WCPC. Shout out to Western Cyber Protection Center. That was my old unit. Currently have my own business called Blackburn Security, focusing in federal contracting. I also make YouTube videos around OSINT and I guess whatever goes. It's kind of all over the place, but I do have a YouTube channel, so check it out. It's 0x4k0. And then I'm also a DC chapter organizer myself, DC253. So shout out to DC253. So what is OSINT? Well, OSINT stands for Open Source Intelligence. It's basically information that's freely available. So whether that's public records, Google, websites, etc., basically it's information that anyone is able to find. It just takes a little bit of work to find it. This includes things like images, text, social media profiles, public records, videos, etc. Anything you can kind of Google or work your way into is OSINT. That includes data dumps. So if it was confidential data and someone threw it on a basement or ghostbin or whatever, that's openly available, even though prior it wasn't. So it is open source, and that, I guess, means what isn't OSINT. So this is kind of my own personal opinion. That is interacting with the target, and that can mean a few things. So whether that's like going to the person you're investigating saying, hey, give me your credit card number, that's not OSINT. Or going to a website could be OSINT, could not be OSINT. My definition of OSINT is that the person or organization that you're targeting will have zero clue you're gathering intelligence on them. That's including going to their website, which I'll get into how to get around that later on. Anything that is a paid service, so if you have to pay to access certain tools, I don't believe that is OSINT, because you have to pay for that, even if they are gathering like openly available things. So like services like LexisNexis, I wouldn't consider OSINT. Special access forms, so any forms that require you to be vetted by individuals just to get access to. This is not websites you have to sign up for, like Shodan or Wiggle. And then anything that's not publicly available. I don't consider any of these things OSINT. Some other people might. I think it's up for discussion. So who's this talk for? Well, anyone with a curious mind. If you like to find stuff that you wouldn't normally find, here you go. Bug bounty hunters, if you like doing bug bounties, I found a lot of useful, situations where OSINT was definitely needed. It's kind of a big part of bug bounty, and that's doing Recon. Red teams, so if you're on an engagement and you want to gather some very basic reconnaissance on a business. PIs, if you're a private investigator, and beginners. That's kind of broad, but if you're just brand new to intelligence gathering, or if you're brand new to cybersecurity, you might walk away with some new skills here, I hope. So topics we're going to be talking about: IP space enumeration, subdomain enumeration, Shodan, How you can have a talk on OSINT without Shodan? Google Dorking, GitHub code searching, LinkedIn, and wireless. That last one's kind of a curveball if you're into OSINT. So let's start off with IP space enumeration. So we are going to find the IP addresses to an organization. This is very easy to do, and you'll be kind of shocked how easy it is. So what I like to do, and what's kind of like my go-to for anything IP related and enumeration, is finding the autonomous system numbers for a business. Now, let's say like I'm University of Washington. Well, I actually have an example right here. I am University of Washington. I am ASN 73, and I own these IP addresses, and that's publicly available online. The service I like to go to is Hurricane Electric, their BGP website, so bgp.he.net. And basically in the search bar, I put in quotes, University of Washington, and voila, I got their autonomous system numbers right there, all 4 of them, and then their IP ranges as well. So that was easy. I didn't have to do any Nmap. I didn't have to do any mask. I didn't have to do any of that. I just typed in University of Washington, got their autonomous system numbers, and I'm good to go. I got their IPs just like that. Now, I will say most organizations, if they're smaller, probably won't have autonomous system numbers, but it's worth checking. And then continuing on with that, you can go into Shodan, which we'll cover later on more in depth about Shodan. But Shodan has their own search, I guess, filter, ASN, and then you put in the autonomous system number in there, and you get results from that autonomous system. You see the IP addresses, maybe some host names, some services. We'll get into that later. Subdomain enumeration. So this one is kind of the same concept as IP space enumeration, but with, well, subdomains. So my go-to for a very easy, high-level subdomain enumeration is DNSDumpster.com. You throw in a domain name, and it spits out all of the DNS records. That includes A records, TXT records, MX. I'm not going to get into what any of that means, but you could get mail servers, their subdomains, their name resolvers, all that stuff. So you can see right here we have like uw.edu. We have some subdomains, so chd2.uw.edu. We have the IP address, and we have the full FQDN, fully qualified domain name right there. So giant list, and you can also export that to like a CSV. So my use case for this is if I'm going to move away from OSINT and actually doing an attack, I'll export all of these IP addresses and throw it into something like MassScan and scan all of those IPs and see what's open. You can do all sorts of stuff with that. So, and you can also see that it includes IP addresses in there as well. So if something didn't show up on Shodan, or if nothing showed up, doing the host command on Linux, well, you get some IP addresses right there. Another tool is crt.sh. This is included in Nahamsek's Lazy Recon repo, but this is basically pulling subdomains that are using the certificate of like the main domain. So like uw.edu will have like their TLS cert. We'll also include the subdomains as well if they share that same certificate. So you can see right here we have things in here like citrix.nursing.uw.edu. If you know what Citrix is, that's kind of an interesting target if you're doing bug bounties, if UW had a bug bounty program, but I digress. So it pulls, like I said, pulls DNS names from TLS certificates, and it's included in Nahamsek's Lazy Recon repo, which we will cover in a bit. Another way is to just do some very basic Google searching, which we'll cover Google Dorking in a bit. But you use the site parameter or site filter. So we've done site:/uw.edu, and then we did -site:/uw.edu, or -site:/www.uw.edu, because we want to filter out the results containing uw.edu. And you can see we got results right here: span port.uw.edu, ISO uw.edu, etc., etc. And we have 446,000 results. And you also get cached content, which we will cover in a bit. And I'm going to pause and go get some water. Apologies. Okay. I don't need headphones. Why do I need headphones? And then, like I mentioned earlier, Lazy Recon. This is on GitHub. This is a little bit more time intensive to run. But Lazy Recon basically aggregates a bunch of reconnaissance tools. I can't vet 100% this is entirely OSINT. I haven't checked everything to make sure that there's like no touching of endpoints of the corporation or anything like that. But basically it aggregates a bunch of tools together and it runs in the background. So you could just do / recon or lazyrecon.sh and then the domain name, and then you could just kind of close out that terminal or make it run on like a screen, and it runs in the background, and then it gathers all the info for you and you can review it later. So that is Lazy Recon by Nahamsek, who is a bug bounty hunter, a pretty badass one. He streams as well, so definitely check out his Twitch streams when he goes live. And Nahamsek is his handle on Twitter. So Shodan, this is like my favorite website of all time. Let's get straight into it. So what is Shodan? It's shodan.io. That is the domain name. It's an internet scanner, and it scans all the time on your behalf. And when I say on your behalf, meaning it scans and indexes it. You don't have to do anything. You don't kick off any scans. Shodan's just scanning all the time. So it's an internet scanner. Basically, think of it as Nmap, but on the entire internet, excluding a few IP ranges. So it's an internet scanner. It's scanning for open ports, services, autonomous system numbers, etc. It's a giant Nmap scan. I don't know a better way to put it. It's just a giant Nmap scan. And it can also take screenshots, which we'll cover in a bit. But it can take screenshots of web pages and RDP and all that. So if you're doing recon on an organization and they have port 3389 open, Shodan will take those screenshots on your behalf, and you could see, oh, these are the users that logged in. Oh, they've disabled authentication, or whatever. And it's completely passive, meaning that the website or the corporation you're doing OSINT on, they see Shodan scanning them, but they don't see you scanning them. You can browse Shodan, click on like the images. You're not ever connecting with the website itself, and it's archived somewhat. It scans and it stores the scan until the next time it scans, that IP again, which I don't know how frequent Shodan does that. But it basically, it does its scan, and then it saves that scan for however long it saves it for. So it's a great way to view data that is a little bit older, but you don't have to manually do the scan yourself. So it's pretty nice. So on Shodan, there's all sorts of search filters you can use. It's kind of crazy, and I'm actually building a GitHub repo as I was in the middle of making these slide decks for Shodan and Google Dorking, all the different search filters you can use on Shodan and Google, because there's a ton. I can't cover, it could be its own slide or its own talk of all the things you could do on Shodan. So we're just doing a very basic search right here. So we're doing org : and then in quotes, University of Washington. So now it's searching for everything associated with the organization named University of Washington. And you can see Shodan has 11,000 results. And I believe they pull the organization name from the Autonomous System Numbers organization. So my methodology to doing the search via org is to go on like BGP-HE, which we've covered, type in, University of Washington, and then throwing the autonomous system number into Shodan, and then it'll say, you could see like under the IP address, like University of Washington. Some organizations will be like, Blackburn Security, but if you type in org : in quotes Blackburn Security, it might not show up because it might show up on Shodan as Blackburn Security LLC or company or something like that. So I'm just a little bit more thorough. So I look up the AES number, which I know is going to yield results most of the time on here, and then click on like the bolded like University of Washington or whatever organization. Click on that, and then delete the autonomous system number in the search. And now this will aggregate all of the autonomous system numbers associated with that organization and just make one, result like this. So if I looked up like all 4 of those AS numbers for University of Washington, I'd get like 900 and maybe 1,000, but it aggregates it all together. So finding juicy ports. Now this is kind of vague, but basically we're looking for ports that, you know, an attacker might go after. I just did some very high level, you know, ports in here. So I did org University of Washington space port and then colon. I did 21, so FTP 445, which is SMB or Samba, 3389, which is RDP, and then 5900, which is VNC. So you can see we have 64 results that belong to University of Washington and have those ports open. And you could go down and view them if you wanted or whatever, but notice how I used comma on the port. So like port 21, comma 445, comma 3389. That allows you to add multiple entries for one search filter. So helpful tip if you've been using Shodan for a while and you've been typing out port 22 space port 21 or whatever. Just use commas. So this is what people mainly use Shodan for. It's cameras and stuff and security cams. I can make a whole video on how to find all sorts of stuff with webcams and industrial control systems and all that, but that's for another time. So if I want to find screenshots on Shodan, most of the time it's going to be cameras and VNC and RDP. I did, you know, org University of Washington and then space has underscore screenshot colon true, meaning that it's looking for IPs that belong to University of Washington, and Shodan took a screenshot of it. So you can see these two results right here are of the tennis court at University of Washington. You'll get different results for all sorts. You might get RDP, VNC, cams like this. It's kind of can be all over the place. So, but that's how you find, you know, webcams and all that fun stuff. Now this one is a little bit more advanced, and I don't expect any beginner to, you know how to do this, but you could search via Favicon. Now, Favicon is like if you open up a tab and you go to, like, in this case, University of Washington, you'll get that like little icon on the top left or of the tab or whatever. That's the Favicon, and you could search Shodan for that Favicon. It's a little bit more advanced. I have a video on my YouTube channel about calculating that because it's a base 64 hash, numeric hash. It's way in the weeds for this video, but that is a way to do recon for a specific organization. So if they might have some IPs that creeped outside their autonomous system number range, but they have that little Favicon, you could search via the Favicon base 64 numeric hash on Shodan. So I have a video for that. I can explain that individually in like its own video, but that's definitely outside the scope of beginner sort of stuff. So now we're going to be doing some Google dorking or Google hacking, and I forgot to add it into my slide decks, but there is a website called the Google Hacking Database, which is just a giant repository of all these different Google searches you can use to find like passwords, SQL backups. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. I think it's just or Google GHDB.com. Google Hacking Database. Just, I guess, Google that. It has all sorts of searches on there. So what is Google dorking? It's just advanced Googling. Like you do your normal Googling, and then there's like very specific filters you can use on Google to like kind of narrow your results down. So think of it as like a shotgun blast, bring it down to like a sniper's shot sort of thing. And I'll include a complete list of search operators in the show notes, aka my GitHub. So check that out. It'll be on my Twitter account. So basic Google search. So this is what you probably use, like Google or Yandex or Baidu or whatever search engine. You'll just type in like University of Washington or whatever, and you can see we get results from Wikipedia, Tacoma.uw.edu, uw.b.edu, Twitter. It's all over the place, and I'm sure there's millions of results in here, and that's going to be a lot of data you're going to have to parse through. So let's bring that shotgun blast down all the way down to a sniper's shot. So let's bring those results from, we don't want Wikipedia, we don't want Twitter, we only want uw.edu. So we use the search operator site:uw.edu. So now we have 455,000 results that only yield things from uw.edu. So everything in those 455,000 pages is going to be from uw.edu. So let's find some files in uw.edu, and we're going to use the ext filter. So you can see that right there, ext, and that's synonymous with file type. So you might have seen that. So file type : or ext : they both do the same thing. So ext : and then I actually put it in the parentheses. This is kind of like not an advanced, but it's kind of somewhat an advanced technique. So I'm searching for PDFs, CSVs, Excel spreadsheets, and TXT files in uw.edu, and I put that in parentheses and space those out with pipes, as you call them. So now we're getting results. So 8,480 results for PDFs or CSVs or Excel spreadsheets or TXTs in uw.edu. So now let's find specific texts in uw.edu. So you use a search filter in text, and then I put it in quotes. So cybersecurity, and I'm looking for PDFs. So you can see we got some results right here. These are all PDFs that have cybersecurity in that file that belong to uw.edu. So you can see where I'm going with this. There's so much stuff you can use with Google Dorking, so much info you can find. So I'll let you all kind of go down your own rabbit holes doing all this. Now, cached content. I talked about earlier about connecting with the endpoint, meaning that you are going to the website directly. Google caches content for you, and you can actually view like PDFs and Excel spreadsheets and all that a lot faster because you're not downloading it from the website or anything like that. You're downloading it basically from Google's cache, which is probably going to be more local to you versus like wherever the website is you're doing Recon on. It also allows you to view content that has been deleted. So sometimes like a Twitter post, like let's say someone said something on Twitter and they deleted it. Well, if Google cached it, it doesn't matter if that content was deleted on Twitter. It could probably still show up on Twitter or Google's cache. You can view things like PDFs, HTML, spreadsheets, all that good jazz through Google's cache. But the most important thing about the cache with OSINT is you're not directly connecting with the website. And the way you get the cache is if you see like the URL right here, and then you see this like little drop down, click on the little down arrow and it says cached, click on that and you'll be able to load it that way. So now let's do some GitHub code searching. So GitHub is like a giant repo for code. If you make a program or whatever, you can upload to GitHub. You can host websites on there. GitHub is a developer's kind of go-to. You have other sites like GitLab and all that, but GitHub's, I would say, is probably the most used one. So doing a code search will allow you to search for employees or students. You could possibly view confidential data. People really suck at security, and they might throw some things in there that they might have forgotten about. They might have forgot that you left that comment in the code that has their password or whatever in it. And you can also build a rapport. So if you're going to be doing a social engineering engagement, you can narrow your attack down to a specific person, and you kind of have like this knowledge about them, and you could talk to them about something. So if they're building like all this code for XYZ project, and you see them in person, you could definitely talk about that, and they'll be very interested in talking to you. So basic GitHub code search, you go on the top left, and I typed in, University of Washington in quotes, and I got results, 1,395 results with University of Washington in it. So these are going to be repositories. You can see that on the top left right there, and they all have University of Washington. And the reason why I put it in quotes, it's going to read it as a literal string, not just like university and Washington. It's searching for that specific phrase verbatim. And then continuing on, the GitHub search, University of Washington, all I did was clicked on users right there. And now we have users of GitHub that have University of Washington in their, bio or whatever you call it on GitHub. So PhD student, student, research scientist, blah, 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 blah. Work your way down. So now you can search code. We're going to be doing code searching by organization. Unfortunately, UW didn't have a organization registered with GitHub, so I'm just using AWS. So I'm searching org:AWS and then in quotes password. And now I clicked on the code tab right there, and now I got 4,500 results of password being under the organization of AWS on GitHub, and it highlights the results right here. So I'll let your mind go with that as far as bug bounties go. There's actually tools out there like TruffleHog, which I don't think is working anymore because of Python 3, but searches for like plain text creds and stuff like that. Searching for files on GitHub. So we use the same thing, org, AWS, and then language. Instead of like file type or extension, we're using language : and then we put in CSV. And now we're getting all of the CSV files that belong under the organization AWS on GitHub. So now this is the fun stuff. Ish. So LinkedIn is basically a hacker's pipe dream of rapport building. This is where you find employees of organizations. You can find people in HR, security, you name it. If they have a LinkedIn, they're probably going to be a little braggadocious about what they do, and pretty open. And if you're trying to build a rapport on a business, it's a great way to find some stuff. It's a professional Facebook social media site, so everyone there is business suit, super, formal and all that. It's a great way to enumerate the tech stack, projects that have been done there, management chain, and I'm not including examples of this, but some of the big tech companies, people like to share their badges as a celebration of tenure at a particular organization. I don't know why that's a thing, but if you're going to be doing a social engineering engagement, well, you know how the badges look because they like to take a little picture of it and post it on LinkedIn. So searching for employees. So on LinkedIn, you'll need an account for this. And I'll also note, if you're going to be going onto any of these pages, it will probably help to have gold on LinkedIn, which is a paid service, unfortunately, because it'll notify them that you viewed their account. So you could probably just make a sock puppet, or a sock puppet's a fake account, and you could view their accounts and get more intel that way. But we basically typed in cybersecurity on LinkedIn, hit enter, and then under current companies, I typed in University of Washington and selected that. So now we're getting results for people that work at University of Washington that have some relation to cybersecurity. So you can see right here. So LinkedIn, it's kind of niche, but that's kind of the way I do it. And I left out going onto the profiles because that will notify whoever you're doing intel on that you viewed them. But if you do have LinkedIn Gold, you can go ahead and do that. Just make sure you select do not notify. And then the last one here is finding corporate SSIDs. Now this one's pretty interesting and kind of fun. So let's get into it a little bit more. So what is SSID? I totally forgot what it stands for. I've said it my entire life and don't know what it stands for, but it's the Wi-Fi names. It's your Wi-Fi name. So it's your Wi-Fi's and internet. So if you have a wireless router at your home, you probably have an SSID. Allows you to scope out open and free networks. So if you're doing recon on a particular area, you can click on freenet. We'll get into that in a little bit. And view unprotected networks, and that might be a pivot point for you to get onto the network, pull some stuff down. That's not OSINT doing that attack, but gathering that recon is. And you can also be used for non-OSINT intelligence gathering. I actually made a video, and I've since deleted it, about going on a Shodan, finding a printer that was open to the internet, going onto that printer, turning on the wireless card to enumerate all of the SSIDs around that printer, and I'll show you what I've done from there. It's geolocating an IP address with the printer. That's what the name was. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. So the go-to site to gather intel on wireless networks is wiggle.net, W-I-G-L-E.net, and it maps Wi-Fi. So this data is collected from people war driving. So war driving is you basically, I do this. It's such a niche hobby for people to do. They basically, you have, something like this. This is actually my Raspberry Pi war driving rig. And I basically have an antenna that I plug on here and a GPS module, and I go and scan for Wi-Fi networks and upload it to Wiggle. So it's collected from people war driving, and it has archived networks that go all the way back to 2001. So we'll get into specifics of Wiggle in a bit. So this is kind of what Wiggle looks like. So I typed in University of Washington on Wiggle, and each of these little dots symbolizes a network. Now I do have the search going all the way back to 2001, so you could drag this little thing right here and bring it to more newer date, I guess. But each of these little purple dots signifies a Wi-Fi or an SSID or a Wi-Fi network. And then zooming in on the map itself will actually show the wireless names themselves. So you can see we have NWG real estate 5 gigahertz and whatever file scan Wi-Fi AP University of Washington blah 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 blah. And I'll put the dot in kind of the location where the war driver or whatever person found it. We'll kind of put it on the map, kind of exactly where it's at, almost. Not to the exact location, but plus or minus 50 meters, I would say. So zooming in, this is the University of Washington campus right here. Now the Wiggle Advanced Search is a pretty powerful tool. So I did that very basic reconnaissance. I found, all of the SSIDs, and I want to find all the SSIDs that are of interest to me, because you could see, they go back, we could see okay, well, Motorola A28 whatever right there, that's not of interest to me. That's not of interest to me. NWG real estate's not of interest to me, but University of Washington is an interest of mine, or University of Washington whatever that says is of interest to me. So let's find all of the SSIDs in the world with that particular name. So I go to, basically you go to, I think it's View. I click on View and it'll bring down a menu, click on Advanced Search. And then under SSID network name exact match, I just put in University of Washington, and then last observed. So if you want to find the freshest results, I just put in, 2020, January 1st, right there, in that format right there. And you click query, and you get results like this. So you get the SSID on a map. So if you click on map, it'll drop a little pin on that location. The MAC address of that router, the SSID name, first seen, last seen, the kind of cryptography that the wireless standard it's using. So you can see right there. I don't know if that means WEP or what. I think that's WEP or open. But that's an old network. That's an old router right there that they have. So first seen in 2001. Nice. And then the channel it's running on. So we have 685 results of SSIDs named University of Washington that has been found since, or most recently seen as late of, or January 1st, 2020. So it can be found no earlier than January 1st, 2020. So it's going to be the freshest results. So that is it. Any questions that you have? I know that was a ton. Hopefully you'll be able to view this in a DVR format and stop and kind of rewatch it. But any questions any of you have, feel free to send me a message on Twitter, or at me on Twitter. It's just 0x4k0. I have a Discord server as well. I have, I think, 60-ish people on my Discord server that are all subscribed to me on YouTube, which, smash that subscribe button on my YouTube channel. And all of this will be linked in my bio. So anyways, thank you for hosting me. I hope you all enjoyed my talk. Yeah, that's it. So y'all take care. Goodbye.